When the untouchable CEO of America's most powerful defense empire shocked the world by marrying her janitor, no one suspected the quiet man sweeping floors once commanded the nation's deadliest warriors. But in a boardroom where billion-dollar deals are made and broken, where corporate titans feast on each other's blood, Elena Cross just signed a contract that will either destroy her empire or reveal the most dangerous love story ever told. Welcome to a tale of deception, desire, and deadly secrets that will leave you breathless. Stay with me until the very end and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this incredible story has traveled across the world. The mahogany doors of Titan Defense's 42nd floor boardroom burst open with the force of a hurricane, and Elena Cross strode in like a warrior queen claiming her throne. Every head turned toward the woman who had built America's most formidable defense contractor from the ashes of her father's legacy. Her Louboutin heels clicking against Italian marble with the precision of gunfire. "Gentlemen," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk, "I'd like you to meet my husband." The collective intake of breath could have powered a small aircraft. 12 of the most powerful men in the defense industry, men who had watched Elena claw her way to the top with ruthless determination, men who whispered that she was too cold, too calculating, too dangerous to ever love, sat frozen in their leather chairs. But it wasn't Elena who had stolen their voices. It was the man standing quietly beside her. Daniel Reed looked exactly like what he was supposed to be: invisible. Average height, unremarkable build, wearing a simple black suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. His dark hair was neatly combed, but not styled. His face pleasant, but forgettable. He was the kind of man you'd pass in a hallway without a second glance, the human equivalent of wallpaper. The board members knew him, of course. He was the night janitor who emptied their trash cans and cleaned their offices. The ghost who moved through their world after hours, leaving everything spotless and pretending he didn't exist when they occasionally worked late. "Elena," stammered Richard Blackwood, the silver-haired chairman, whose family had built half of Washington's monuments. "Surely this is some kind of misunderstanding." Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "No misunderstanding, Richard. Daniel and I were married this morning in a private ceremony. The marriage certificate is being filed as we speak." She moved to the head of the conference table, her movements fluid and predatory. Behind her, Daniel remained motionless, his hands clasped behind his back, his gray eyes scanning the room with the kind of casual alertness that most people attributed to good breeding rather than tactical awareness. "This is preposterous!" exploded Marcus Thornfield, whose military contracts had made him richer than some small nations. "You can't seriously expect us to believe that you married the cleaning staff." "I don't expect you to believe anything, Marcus." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "I expect you to do your jobs. The quarterly reports are on your tablets. Revenue is up 18%, our government contracts have expanded into 3 new sectors, and our private military divisions are operating at capacity. My personal life has no bearing on your obligation to make this company profitable." But even as she spoke, she could feel their stares boring into her, their minds racing to decode this impossible puzzle. Elena Cross, the ice queen of corporate America. The woman who had turned down senators and tech billionaires had married a janitor. What they couldn't see, what Elena herself was only beginning to understand, was the way Daniel's presence changed the very air in the room. He stood like a man who had looked death in the eye and found it wanting his stillness, not empty, but full of coiled potential. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, respectful, and absolutely terrifying in its calm certainty. "Gentlemen," Daniel said, and somehow his soft tone commanded more attention than Elena's razor-sharp declarations. I understand this news is unexpected. But I assure you, my marriage to Elena will not interfere with Titan Defense's operations. If anything, her security and by extension the company's security has never been better protected. The way he said protected made several board members shift uncomfortably in their chairs. There was something in that word, something that suggested Daniel Reed knew more about protection than emptying wastebaskets. Security? Richard's laugh was nervous forced. What would a janitor know about security? Daniel's smile was polite and somehow more unsettling than Elena's predatory grins. More than you might think, sir. Elena watched this exchange with growing fascination. She had married Daniel for one reason, and one reason only, her grandfather's will. The eccentric old bastard had built Titan Defense from nothing, turning it into a billion-dollar empire before dying suddenly 3 months ago. His will had been a masterpiece of manipulation, leaving Elena, the company, on one condition. She had to be married within 6 months of his death. She had chosen Daniel because he was safe, invisible. A man with no ambition, no connections, no agenda beyond keeping his head down and earning his paycheck. A man she could control completely, who would sign whatever prenuptial agreement she put in front of him and disappear into the background of her life. Except now, watching him face down a room full of alpha predators, with the composure of a man who had commanded armies, Elena was beginning to suspect she had made a terrible miscalculation. Perhaps, Elena said, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. We should focus on business. Daniel, you can wait in my office. It was a dismissal, clean and simple. The kind of order a powerful woman might give to a spouse she kept on a leash. Daniel nodded once, a gesture so respectful it bordered on military protocol. Of course, it was a pleasure meeting you all. He moved toward the door with the same unremarkable gait that had carried him through Titan's halls for months. But as his hand touched the brass handle, Richard Blackwood made his fatal mistake. Well, I suppose every empire needs its servants, he said with a chuckle, designed to cut Daniel down to size. Just remember your place, janitor. Daniel stopped. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as he slowly turned back toward the table. His gray eyes found Richard's face, and for just a moment, a single crystalline moment, the mask slipped. What Elena saw in Daniel's eyes wasn't anger. It was the kind of cold, professional assessment a sniper makes when calculating distance and wind speed. The look of a man who had ended lives with less provocation than this. My place, Daniel said softly, is wherever my wife needs me to be. Then the moment passed, the mask slipped back into place, and Daniel Reed became unremarkable again. He left the room with the quiet efficiency of a man who had never threatened anyone in his life. But Elena had seen, and in that glimpse behind the curtain, she had seen something that made her blood run cold and her pulse quicken in equal measure. Elena, Marcus said after the door closed, his voice heavy with concern. You need to reconsider this. The board won't stand for Psalm. The board, Elena interrupted, will stand for whatever I tell them to stand for, or they can find new jobs. Your choice, gentlemen. She gathered her files with sharp, efficient movements, her mind racing. Daniel Reed was not what he seemed. The question was, what was he really? An hour later, Elena sat behind her desk in the executive suite studying the marriage certificate that had already changed her life in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan spread out below her like a kingdom she had conquered through will and ruthlessness. The door opened without a knock, and Daniel entered carrying a tray with coffee and sandwiches. He set it down on the small table by the window, with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. I thought you might be hungry, he said. You didn't eat breakfast. Elena's eyes narrowed. She hadn't mentioned skipping breakfast to anyone. How would you know that? I notice things. Daniel poured coffee into 2 cups with steady hands. It's important to notice things when you're responsible for someone's well-being. Responsible. Elena's voice could have etched glass. Daniel, let me be very clear about something. This marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. You signed the prenuptial agreement that makes that abundantly clear. You get a comfortable life, a generous allowance, and all I ask in return is that you stay out of my way and don't embarrass me publicly. Daniel handed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing for just a moment. His hands were calloused, she noticed, hard. Not the hands of a man who had spent his life pushing a mop. I understand the terms of our arrangement, he said calmly. But understanding terms doesn't change certain realities. What realities? You're in danger, Elena. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena set down her coffee cup with exaggerated care, her predator instincts suddenly screaming. Explain. Your grandfather's death wasn't natural. Daniel moved to the window, his eyes scanning the street below with professional thoroughness. Victor Cross was murdered, and whoever killed him isn't finished. Elena's world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. He had a heart attack. The medical examiner found what he was supposed to find. Daniel's voice remained calm, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. Potassium chloride administered correctly mimics cardiac arrest perfectly, undetectable unless you know what to look for. And you know what to look for. Elena's voice was deadly quiet. What exactly are you, Daniel Reed? He turned from the window, and for the second time that day, Elena saw past the mask. What she found there was a man who had walked through fire and emerged harder than steel. I'm someone who knew your grandfather, someone he trusted with his most important secret. Daniel's gray eyes held hers steadily. He knew they were coming for him, Elena. He knew they would come for you next. That's why he put the marriage clause in his will. He needed someone close to you, someone they would never suspect. Elena's mind raced through the implications, her strategic thinking cutting through the emotional chaos like a laser through fog. You're saying my grandfather arranged our marriage. I'm saying he gave me an opportunity to protect you. The choice to take that opportunity was mine. Protect me from what? From the people who want to destroy Titan Defense and everyone connected to it. Daniel moved closer, and Elena caught a scent that shouldn't belong to a janitor gun. Oil and something sharp, medicinal. Your grandfather built this company on government contracts and classified research. He made enemies, powerful ones. Elena stood slowly, her body coiled with tension. Who are you really? For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, with the precision of a man accustomed to briefing rooms and classified files, he began to speak. My name is Daniel Reed. That part is true. For the last 6 months, I've worked as a janitor in this building. That part is also true. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What I haven't told you is that for the 15 years before that I've commanded special operations units for the United States military. Classified missions. The kind of work that doesn't appear on official records. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Special operations. The grandfather you thought you knew contacted me 8 months ago through channels that officially don't exist. He had reason to believe his life was in danger and that after his death you would be next. He offered me a job, get close to you, protect you, and help you survive whatever storm was coming. By pretending to be a janitor. By becoming invisible. The best protection comes from shadows, Elena. No one suspects the man who empties their trash cans of being anything more than furniture. Elena moved around her desk, every instinct telling her to run, while another deeper instinct whispered that she had never been safer in her life. You've been watching me for 6 months. I've been protecting you for 6 months. Daniel's voice softened slightly. And yes, watching you. Learning your patterns, your habits, your vulnerabilities. Your grandfather was right to be worried you take too many risks, trust too easily, and you have a blind spot when it comes to people who might hurt you. Trust too easily. Elena's laugh was bitter. People call me the Ice Queen Daniel. They say I have no heart at all. People say a lot of things. They're usually wrong. Daniel stepped closer, close enough that Elena could see the faint scars along his jawline, the kind that came from fighting for your life in places where backup was a luxury you couldn't afford. You trust your board members who would sell you to your competitors for the right price. You trust business partners who would destroy you without hesitation if it served their interests. You trust in systems and contracts and legal protections that won't mean anything when the real danger comes. And what should I trust instead? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Trust the man who chose to marry you knowing it would paint a target on his back. Trust the man who has spent 6 months learning every entrance and exit to this building, every security weakness, every potential threat. Daniel's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Trust the man who would die before he let anyone hurt you. The words hung in the air between them, like a bridge neither of them was quite ready to cross. Elena felt something shifting inside her chest, something that had been frozen for so long she had forgotten it existed. Why? She asked. Why would you do this, money my grandfather's threats? Your grandfather offered me money, yes, a substantial amount. Daniel's smile was sad, almost rueful. But that's not why I said yes. Then why, Tone? Because I watched you for 3 days before I agreed to take the job. I saw how you worked 16-hour days, how you treated the lowest-level employees with the same respect you gave your board members. I saw you donate anonymously to charities, saw you personally call the families of employees who were hurt on the job. Daniel's voice grew softer. I saw a woman who deserved to be protected, not because she was valuable to the company or to the country, but because she was worth protecting. Elena felt tears threaten behind her eyes, an unfamiliar burning that she hadn't experienced since her father's funeral. Daniel, I know this changes things between us, he said quickly. I know you didn't sign up for a husband with my kind of baggage. If you want out, if you want an annulment, I'll understand. But I won't stop protecting you. That's not negotiable. Elena stared at this man who had upended her world twice in one day, this stranger who knew her better than people she had worked with for years. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to end this now, to cut her losses and find another way to satisfy her grandfather's will. But Elena Cross hadn't built an empire by taking the safe road. Show me, she said. Show me who you really are. Daniel studied her face for a long moment, as if weighing risks and calculating odds. Then he moved to her desk and activated the privacy screen that blocked the windows and sealed the room from electronic surveillance. What happened next would haunt Elena's dreams and fuel her fantasies for months to come. Daniel reached behind his back and produced a pistol that had definitely not been there moments before. His movements were fluid, economical, the muscle memory of a man who had drawn weapons under fire. He checked the chamber with professional efficiency, then set the gun on her desk. Glock 19 modified for concealment. I carry it everywhere. His voice had changed, becoming clipped, authoritative. The voice of a man accustomed to giving orders that meant life or death. I also carry a knife in my right boot, another in my jacket, and enough emergency medical supplies to keep someone alive until help arrives. Elena stared at the weapon, its black metal surface gleaming under the office lights. You've been armed this entire time. Armed, trained, and ready. Daniel moved to the window, his posture shifting into something that could only be described as tactical awareness. I know the real names and backgrounds of everyone on your security team. 3 of them have gambling debts that make them vulnerable to coercion. 2 have family members who could be used as leverage. Your head of security, Thompson, is clean, but he's also predictable. He thinks like a cop, not like someone hunting a target. And you think like someone hunting a target? Daniel turned back to her, and Elena saw the warrior. He had been the man who had probably killed more people than she wanted to know about. I think like someone who has been hunted. There's a difference. Elena picked up the gun, surprised by its weight, its solidity. You really believe someone is coming for me? I know they are. Daniel moved closer, his eyes tracking her handling of the weapon with professional assessment. Your grandfather's murder was just the beginning. They want Titan defense, Elena. The technology, the contracts, the access to classified systems. With you dead and no clear succession, they can pick apart the company piece by piece. Who are they? Industrial espionage networks, foreign intelligence services, corporate raiders with government backing. Daniel's jaw tightened. Your grandfather was developing something in the classified divisions, something worth killing for. He never told me what it was, but he was scared enough to recruit a man like me. Elena set the gun down carefully, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. The Aurora project. Daniel's head snapped toward her. What did you say? The Aurora project. It's been running for 2 years in our most secure facility. My grandfather oversaw it personally, but he never briefed me on the details. Elena moved to her safe, inputting the biometric codes that protected her most sensitive files. He said I would inherit it when the time was right. She pulled out a thin folder marked with enough security classifications to start a small war. Inside were project summaries, budget allocations, and personnel files for scientists whose backgrounds had been scrubbed so clean they practically glowed. Daniel read over her shoulder, his body close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Up close, she could see that the unremarkable man was actually built like a weapon-lean, muscle-controlled power, the kind of fitness that came from survival rather than vanity. Jesus Christ, he whispered, and Elena had never heard profanity sound so much like a prayer. Elena, this is revolutionary. The file described a new form of warfare technology, something that could revolutionize everything from missile defense to space exploration. In the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of power between nations. No wonder they killed him, Daniel said grimly. This technology is worth more than money. It's worth wars. Elena closed the file, her hands trembling slightly. So what do? We survive. Daniel moved back to the window, his eyes scanning for threats that Elena couldn't see. We find out who killed your grandfather, we protect the Aurora project, and we make sure they don't succeed in destroying everything he built. Daniel looked back at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip dangerously. You're my wife, Elena. For better or worse, we're in this together now. The words should have sounded like a business arrangement, a mutual agreement between allies. Instead, they sounded like a promise, like the kind of vow that meant something deeper than contracts and signatures. Elena moved closer to the window, standing beside Daniel, as they looked out over the city that stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, people were planning her death. Somewhere out there, enemies were circling like sharks who had smelled blood in the water. But for the first time in months, Elena didn't feel alone. "Daniel," she said softly, "what happened in there in the boardroom? When Richard called you a servant?" Daniel's reflection in the window smiled, and it was not the gentle expression of a janitor. "Let's just say I don't take disrespect well. It's a character flaw I've been working on." "How hard have you been working on it?" "Not very hard." Elena found herself smiling despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and the complete upheaval of her carefully ordered world. "Good. I've always preferred my husbands dangerous." "Your husbands?" "Plural." "You're my first." Elena turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the privacy screen had created an intimate bubble around them. "I was being hypothetical." "Ah." Daniel's eyes dropped to her lips for just a moment, before returning to her eyes. "Hypothetically speaking, then what other qualities do you prefer?" Elena felt her pulse quicken, felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way Daniel was looking at her. Loyalty, intelligence, the ability to handle themselves in a crisis. Anything else? Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Daniel's gray eyes, close enough to catch that scent of danger that clung to him like cologne. "The courage to tell me the truth, even when it's difficult. Even when the truth is complicated. Especially then." Daniel reached up slowly, giving Elena plenty of time to step away, to retreat behind the walls she had built around her heart. Instead, she stood perfectly still as his fingers brushed against her cheek. "Then here's a complicated truth," he said softly. "I may have started this job to protect you, but that's not why I'm staying." Elena's breath caught. "Why are you staying?" "Because somewhere between emptying your trash can and learning how you take your coffee, between watching you work miracles in impossible situations and seeing you be kind when you thought no one was looking, I stopped thinking of you as an assignment." Daniel's thumb traced along her jawline with infinite gentleness. "You're not just someone I'm protecting anymore, Elena. You're someone I can't imagine losing." The admission hung between them like a bridge they could either cross or burn. Elena felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling, felt something wild and dangerous stirring in her chest. "Daniel," she whispered, "this is crazy. We barely know each other." "I know you take your coffee black, but add sugar when you think no one is watching. I know you work late because you can't stand the thought of letting people down. I know you're afraid of trusting people because everyone you've ever trusted has disappointed you." Daniel's voice was soft, intimate, the kind of tone reserved for confessions and promises. "I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I know that strength comes from being hurt so badly you decided never to be vulnerable again." Elena felt tears threatening again, but this time she didn't fight them. "You can't know all that." "I know it, because I've spent 6 months watching you, Elena. Not just protecting you, but learning you. Every gesture, every expression, every moment when you think you're alone." Daniel's hand cupped her face gently. "I know you, and I'm telling you that you don't have to be alone anymore." Elena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, despite every instinct screaming at her to retreat. "What if you're wrong? What if this is just adrenaline and proximity and the fact that someone is trying to kill me? Then we'll figure it out together." Daniel's forehead touched hers, and Elena could feel his breath against her lips. "But Elena, I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever we discover about who killed your grandfather, or who's after you, so now I'm not going anywhere. This isn't just about protection anymore. Elena opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with the kind of directness that had made her enemies fear her and her allies respect her. What is it about? It's about the fact that I've been alone for a very long time, and for the first time in years, I don't want to be. Daniel's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way that transformed his entire face. It's about the fact that you're brilliant and beautiful and terrifying, and I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hit Elena like a physical force, knocking the breath from her lungs and sending her heart into overdrive. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with this combination of honesty and tenderness and raw desire. "Daniel," she started, but he pressed a finger gently to her lips. "You don't have to say anything. Not yet. We have time to figure this out, to see what this is between us." His eyes held hers steadily. "But I wanted you to know where I stand. No more secrets between us, at least not about this." Elena kissed his finger, a gesture so spontaneous it surprised them both. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've never been in love before. I'm not sure I know how." "Neither do I," Daniel admitted. "But I'm thinking we might figure it out together." And before Elena could respond, before she could analyze or strategize or retreat into the safety of logic, Daniel kissed her. It was soft, at first tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Elena had built an empire by taking risks that terrified other people. And this man who had upended her world in a single day was the most terrifying risk she had ever considered. So instead of pulling away, she kissed him back. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and desperate and hungry. Elena found herself pressed against Daniel's chest, her hands fisting in his shirt, her carefully maintained control dissolving like sugar in rain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena looked up into Daniel's eyes and saw her own shock reflected there. "Well," she said shakily, "that was complicated." Daniel finished, his voice rough with desire. "Very complicated. Are you regretting it?" Elena considered the question seriously, weighing the implications and consequences with the same analytical mind that had built Titan Defense into a powerhouse. The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. But Elena Cross had never been particularly interested in smart or safe. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not regretting it. But Daniel, we need to be clear about something. If we're doing this, whatever this is, we're doing it as equals. I don't need saving and I don't need managing. What I need is a partner." Daniel's smile was slow and devastatingly attractive. "Elena, I've seen you handle a boardroom full of predators without breaking a sweat. The last thing I would ever try to do is manage you. You're not the kind of woman who gets saved, you're the kind who does the saving." "Good answer." Elena straightened her clothes with brisk efficiency, her mind already shifting back into strategic mode. "Now about this threat you mentioned. If someone really is coming for me, we need to be prepared." "We will be." Daniel retrieved his gun from the desk, holstering it with practiced ease. "But Elena, there's something else you need to understand. If we're going to do this together, if we're going to find out who killed your grandfather and protect the Aurora project, things are going to get dangerous. Very dangerous." "I can handle dangerous. I know you can. But this isn't corporate warfare, Elena. This is the kind of dangerous where people die, where mistakes have permanent consequences." Daniel's eyes were serious, almost grave. "I need to know you're ready for that." Elena thought about her grandfather, about the man who had built this company from nothing and died protecting secrets she was only beginning to understand. She thought about the employees who depended on Titan Defense for their livelihoods, about the contracts and technologies that kept the country safe. and she thought about the man standing in front of her, this enigma who had married her to protect her and somehow become the most important person in her world. "I'm ready," she said simply. "What do we do first?" Daniel's smile was sharp, predatory, the expression of a man who had found his battlefield and chosen his side. "First, we find out exactly what your grandfather was working on. Then we figure out who wanted him dead. And then we make them regret it." As the sun began to set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the office where Elena's life had changed forever, she looked at her husband, this stranger, this protector, this man who had somehow become her anchor in a storm she was only beginning to understand, and felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. Whatever came next, whatever dangers lurked in the shadows of her grandfather's empire, she wouldn't face them alone. For the first time in her life, Elena Cross had found someone worth trusting with everything she had built. The question was whether they would both survive long enough to see where this impossible love story would lead. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Manhattan feel electric with possibility. But Elena woke to find Daniel's side of the bed cold and empty. They had spent their first night as a real married couple in her penthouse, and the memory of falling asleep in his arms still made her pulse quicken. But now, as she padded barefoot through the sprawling apartment, she found him standing at the kitchen island, fully dressed, in a charcoal suit that transformed him from unremarkable janitor to devastatingly attractive man of mystery. "You're up early," she said, accepting the coffee he offered with hands that were steadier than she felt. "Old habits." Daniel's eyes swept over her silk robe with an appreciation that sent warmth flooding through her veins. "I've been thinking about the Aurora project. We need to see it for ourselves, Elena. Today." "That's impossible. The facility requires special clearance advanced scheduling. Your grandfather's emergency protocols override standard procedures." Daniel produced a tablet, its screen displaying classified documents that should have been impossible for him to access. "He gave me administrative access to all secure facilities. We can be there within the hour." Elena stared at the authorization codes, her coffee forgotten. "How did you get these?" "Your grandfather was thorough. He anticipated every contingency, including the possibility that you might need immediate access to Aurora without going through normal channels." Daniel's expression grew grim. "He was preparing for war, Elena. The question is whether he knew it had already started." An hour later, they stood outside Titan Defense's most classified facility, a nondescript building in Queens that looked like any other industrial complex. But Elena knew that beneath the ordinary facade lay laboratories that would make NASA envious and security systems that rivaled Fort Knox. Dr. Sarah Chen, the project's lead scientist, met them at the entrance with barely concealed anxiety written across her angular features. "Mrs. Cross, I wasn't expecting you. The Aurora project is at a critical phase, which is exactly why I need to see it." Elena's voice carried the authority that had built empires. "Dr. Chen, this is my husband Daniel. He has full clearance." Dr. Chen's eyes flicked between them, clearly struggling with protocols and hierarchy. "Of course, but please understand what you're about to see. It changes everything we thought we knew about physics." They descended through multiple security checkpoints, each one requiring biometric verification and codes that Daniel seemed to know as well as Elena herself. The deeper they went, the more Elena felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, leaving behind the familiar world of corporate boardrooms for something that belonged in science fiction. The main laboratory took Elena's breath away. A massive chamber stretched out before them, its walls lined with equipment that hummed with barely contained energy. At the center stood something that defied easy description, a crystalline structure the size of a small car, suspended in a web of electromagnetic fields and bathed in light that seemed to bend reality around itself. "My God," Elena whispered. "The Aurora generator," Dr. Chen said, with the pride of a mother showing off her firstborn. "Your grandfather called it humanity's next evolutionary step. It manipulates space-time itself, creating localized fields that can deflect any known projectile, disable electronic systems at a distance, or..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Or do things we're still learning to understand." Daniel moved closer to the containment field, his professional eye cataloging every detail. Defensive capabilities. Nothing we've tested can penetrate the field when it's active. Conventional weapons, explosives, even electromagnetic pulse weapons, they all fail. Dr. Chen pulled up holographic displays, showing test results that made Elena's head spin. But the offensive applications are even more remarkable. We can create focused distortions that would make traditional warfare obsolete. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. Who else knows about this? The core team consists of 12 people, all with the highest security clearances. Your grandfather insisted on absolute compartmentalization. Even I don't know everyone involved in the project. Dr. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. But Mrs. Cross, there have been irregularities lately. Security breaches, data that's gone missing, personnel asking questions they shouldn't know to ask. Daniel and Elena exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "What kind of irregularities?" Daniel asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Someone has been accessing the system remotely using credentials that should be impossible to duplicate. We've strengthened security 3 times in the past month, but they keep finding ways in." Dr. Chen pulled up security logs that painted a picture of systematic infiltration. "Whoever is doing this isn't some random hacker. They know our systems better than most of our own people." Elena studied the data with the analytical mind that had made her a corporate predator. "Dr. Chen, I need a complete list of everyone who has had access to Aurora, including support staff, security personnel, even cleaning crews." "Of course, and I need it now." As Dr. Chen hurried to compile the information, Daniel moved to Elena's side, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "This confirms what your grandfather suspected. Someone on the inside has been feeding information to the people who killed him." "A mole." Elena's voice was flat, emotionless, but Daniel could see the fury building behind her eyes like a storm gathering strength. "In my own company." "It gets worse." Daniel showed her something on his phone, surveillance footage from the building's exterior. "I've been monitoring traffic patterns around the facility. 3 vehicles have made repeated passes in the last week, always with different license plates, but the same occupants." Elena watched the grainy footage, her blood growing colder with each replay. "They're planning something. They're planning to steal Aurora, and they're planning to do it soon." Daniel's hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that was both comforting and possessive. "Elena, we need to move the project. Tonight. Move it where this equipment can't just be loaded onto a truck. Your grandfather anticipated this too." Daniel pulled up another set of files on his tablet. "There's a backup facility in Montana completely off the books. We can have Aurora relocated within 12 hours if we move fast." Dr. Chen returned with the personnel files, her face pale with concern. "Mrs. Cross, there's something else. 3 of our people haven't reported for work in the past 2 days. Dr. Martinez, Dr. Patel, and systems analyst Johnson. We've been trying to reach them, but they're dead." Daniel's words cut through the air like a blade. "Or worse, they've been turned." Elena felt the world shifting beneath her feet. the careful order of her corporate empire crumbling into chaos and violence. Dr. Chen, initiate emergency protocols. I want Aurora prepared for immediate relocation. Ma'am, that will require— I don't care what it requires. Do it. Elena's voice carried the kind of authority that had made senators reconsider their positions. And I want this facility cleared of all non-essential personnel within the hour. As Dr. Chen rushed to comply, Elena found herself alone with Daniel in the midst of technology that could reshape the world. The Aurora generator pulsed with otherworldly light, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Elena, Daniel said softly, there's something else we need to discuss. If we're going to move Aurora, if we're going to fight whoever killed your grandfather, you need to understand what you're really up against. I'm listening. Daniel activated privacy screens around the lab, sealing them from electronic surveillance. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of secrets that had shaped nations. The people who want Aurora aren't just corporate competitors or foreign governments. They're part of something bigger, something that's been operating in the shadows for decades. Daniel moved to the lab's main terminal, his fingers flying over keys with the skill of someone who had breached more secure systems than Elena wanted to know about. Your grandfather stumbled onto them 5 years ago, and it's taken him this long to piece together their real scope. Images flashed across the screen, corporate logos, government officials, military contractors, all connected by lines that formed a web of influence and corruption that stretched across continents. The consortium, Daniel said simply. They don't have an official name, but that's what intelligence services call them. A network of defense contractors, politicians, and military leaders who profit from conflict and chaos. They've been manipulating wars, toppling governments, and stealing technology for the better part of 2 decades. Elena stared at the web of connections, her strategic mind cataloging relationships and implications. And they want Aurora. They want to control Aurora. With this technology, they could make conventional military hardware obsolete overnight. Imagine being the only organization with weapons that can't be stopped by traditional defenses. Daniel's voice grew darker. They could hold entire nations hostage. So we don't let them have it. Elena's voice was steel wrapped in silk. We destroy it first. Elena, no. Daniel caught her hand as she reached for the emergency shutdown controls. Destroying Aurora won't stop them. They'll just find another way, steal another technology, corrupt another brilliant mind. The only way to stop the consortium is to expose them, to bring their entire network into the light. And how exactly do we do that? Daniel's smile was sharp, predatory, the expression of a man who had spent years hunting enemies in the shadows. We make them come to us. We use Aurora as bait, let them think they can take it, and then we spring a trap that brings down their entire operation. Elena felt her pulse quicken, felt the familiar thrill that came with high-stakes negotiations and impossible odds. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, it is. We could lose everything. We could. Elena studied Daniel's face, seeing the man who had commanded special forces units in hostile territory, who had made life-and-death decisions when failure meant more than just losing money or market share. What do you need from me? She asked. Daniel's eyes softened, and for a moment Elena saw not the hardened operative, but the man who had confessed his feelings in her office just yesterday. I need you to trust me. Completely. What we're about to do will require us to appear vulnerable when we're actually strongest, to seem divided, when we're more united than ever. A deception operation. The biggest deception of our lives. Daniel stepped closer, close enough that Elena could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. Elena, this won't just be dangerous for us. Everyone connected to Titan Defense will be at risk. Your employees, your board members, even people who've never heard of Aurora. Are you prepared for that kind of responsibility? Elena thought about her grandfather, about the empire he had built, and the secrets he had died protecting. She thought about Dr. Chen and the other scientists who had dedicated their lives to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. She thought about the thousands of Titan defense employees who depended on the company for their livelihoods. And she thought about the man standing in front of her, this enigma, who had already risked everything to protect her and was now asking her to risk everything in return. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm prepared." Daniel's smile was soft, intimate, the kind of expression reserved for moments when the world fell away and only two people existed. "Then we'd better get started. We have a war to fight." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity that would have impressed a military logistics coordinator. Daniel coordinated the Aurora relocation with the efficiency of someone who had moved classified assets under hostile fire, while Elena managed the corporate side with the ruthless precision that had made her feared in boardrooms across the country. But as evening approached, and the last of the equipment was secured for transport, Elena began to understand the true scope of what they were attempting. Daniel had transformed from her mysterious husband into a battlefield commander, issuing orders with quiet authority and anticipating threats that hadn't yet materialized. "The Montana facility will be ready by dawn," he reported, reviewing updates on a secure tablet. "But Elena, once we activate Aurora in the new location, the consortium will know exactly where we are. We'll have maybe 6 hours before they mobilize a response." Elena nodded, her mind racing through contingencies and escape routes. 6 hours to do what? To record everything. Names, faces, operational details, financial records. Everything we need to expose their entire network. Daniel's expression grew grim. "But once we start that process, there's no going back. They'll throw everything they have at us. Everything. Private military contractors, corrupted government assets, intelligence operatives with no official oversight." Daniel met her eyes steadily. "People will die, Elena. Maybe including us." Elena felt fear and exhilaration warring in her chest, the familiar cocktail of emotions that came with betting everything on a single move. "Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. Yesterday, when you told me you were falling in love with me, did you mean it? Or was it part of the operation? Part of gaining my trust?" Daniel stopped what he was doing, his full attention focusing on her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "Elena, everything I've told you about the consortium, about the threats we're facing, about the plans to protect you, all of that is true. But my feelings for you..." He moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "Those have nothing to do with the mission. Those are entirely, completely real. Even though we've only known each other for... I've been watching you for 6 months, remember, learning your patterns, your habits, your heart." Daniel's thumb traced along her cheekbone. "I know how you take your coffee and how you worry about employees you've never met. I know you work too hard because you're afraid of letting people down, and I know you're braver than anyone has a right to be." Elena felt tears threatening an unfamiliar vulnerability that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Daniel, what if we don't survive this? What if the consortium wins? Then we'll face it together." Daniel's forehead touched hers, and Elena could feel his breath against her lips. "But Elena, I need you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever dangers we face or sacrifices we have to make, loving you has been the best decision I've ever made. Even if it gets you killed, even then..." Elena kissed him, then pouring all her fear and hope and desperate love into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked into his eyes and saw her own fierce determination reflected there. "Then let's make sure it doesn't come to that," she said firmly. "Let's win this thing." As they prepared to leave the facility for what might be the last time, Elena caught sight of the Aurora generator being carefully loaded into a specially designed transport vehicle. The crystalline structure pulsed with otherworldly light, beautiful and terrible, and powerful enough to reshape the world. Tomorrow, they would use it as bait to catch predators who had been hunting in the shadows for decades. Tomorrow, they would risk everything on a gamble that could either save thousands of lives or destroy everyone they cared about. But tonight, as they drove through the streets of New York toward an uncertain future, Elena allowed herself to feel something she had never experienced before: the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the right person fighting for exactly the right cause. The war for Aurora was about to begin, and Elena Cross had never felt more alive. The transport convoy moved through the night like a ghost caravan, 3 unmarked trucks carrying the most valuable technology on Earth toward a destination that existed on no official maps. Elena rode in the lead vehicle, with Daniel watching the city lights fade into rural darkness as they left everything familiar behind. "Second thoughts?" Daniel asked, noting her silence. "About the mission, no." Elena's voice was steady, certain. "About us also, no." Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness between them. "Good. Because what we're about to face will test everything we think we know about ourselves." Elena squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his presence. "Daniel, when this is over, assuming we survive what happens to us, do you disappear back into whatever shadow world you came from?" "Elena, I stopped being that person the moment I married you. Not because of the mission, not because of Aurora, but because you changed something fundamental in me." Daniel's voice was soft, intimate, despite the danger surrounding them. "When this is over, I want to build something real with you. Something that has nothing to do with conspiracies or corporate empires or classified technologies." "What kind of something?" "The kind where I get to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. The kind where we argue about normal things, like what to have for dinner, instead of how to stop international conspiracies." Daniel's smile was visible in the dashboard lights. "The kind where I get to love you without worrying that someone is going to try to kill you for it." Elena felt her heart expand in her chest, felt hope and love and desperate longing all tangled together in a knot of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "That sounds perfect." "Then we'd better make sure we live long enough to have it." The Montana facility appeared out of the darkness like something from a dream, a complex of buildings nestled in a valley that seemed to exist outside of time. As the convoy pulled through gates that sealed behind them with ominous finality, Elena realized there was no going back now. Dr. Chen was waiting for them, her usual composure cracked by exhaustion and stress. "The Aurora generator is ready for reactivation, but Mrs. Cross, the consortium, has been busy. We've intercepted communications suggesting they know about the move." Daniel was already scanning security monitors, his trained eye cataloging threats and defensive positions. "How long do we have?" "Based on the chatter we're seeing, maybe 4 hours before they mobilize a full response team." Dr. Chen pulled up tactical displays that showed the surrounding terrain in detail. "But there's something else. We've identified the mole." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. "Who? Richard Blackwood." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Richard, who had been her grandfather's friend and business partner for over 20 years. Richard, who had helped build Titan Defense into what it was today. Richard, who had questioned her marriage to Daniel with such vehement concern. "You're certain?" Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Financial records don't lie. He's been receiving payments from shell companies connected to the consortium for the past 3 years. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. Mrs. Cross, he's been feeding them intelligence about every major project, every security upgrade, every strategic decision. Daniel was already moving his phone in hand as he coordinated with security teams. Elena, we need to assume he knows about Montana. The consortium will be coming with everything they have. Elena felt rage building in her chest, a fury so pure and cold it threatened to consume her. How many people did he kill with his betrayal? How many secrets did he sell? Including your grandfather, Daniel said quietly. The timing of the heart attack, the medical examiner's findings, all of it points to information that only someone on the board would have had access to. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of betrayal settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. When she opened them again, Daniel saw something in her expression that made him step back instinctively. Elena, activate Aurora, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had made enemies fear her and allies trust her with their lives. Do it now. Mrs. Cross, that will signal our location to... I'm counting on it. Elena moved to the main control panel, her fingers dancing over controls, with the confidence of someone who had built an empire through calculated risks. Dr. Chen, I want Aurora at full power. I want every sensor they have screaming our location. Daniel caught her arm gently but firmly. Elena, what are you planning? I'm planning to end this. Tonight. Here. Elena's eyes blazed with determination that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The consortium wants Aurora. Let them come and take it. Let them bring their mercenaries and their corrupted officials and their network of shadows. We'll be waiting. As Aurora began to power up its otherworldly light, filling the facility, with an energy that seemed to bend reality itself, Elena felt something shifting inside her. The corporate executive, who had built her success through careful planning and risk management, was giving way to something more primal, more dangerous. She was no longer just protecting a company or a technology. She was protecting her family, her future, her love. And Elena Cross had never lost a fight that mattered this much. The war for Aurora was about to reach its climax, and when the dust settled, only one side would be left standing. The Aurora generator hummed to life with a sound that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones, its crystalline structure now blazing with energy that made the air itself shimmer with possibility. The facility's lights dimmed automatically as Aurora drew power, casting everything in an otherworldly glow that transformed the laboratory into something between a cathedral and a battlefield. Full activation in 30 seconds. Dr. Chen announced, her voice tight with anticipation and fear. Mrs. Cross, once Aurora reaches peak output, every intelligence agency on the planet will know exactly where we are. Elena stood at the main control console, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were unleashing. Good. I want them to know. Daniel moved beside her, his eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed the facility's perimeter defenses. Elena, the consortium's response team is already mobilizing. Satellite imagery shows at least 3 helicopters inbound from the south ground vehicles approaching from multiple vectors. How many? Conservative estimate 40 hostiles, maybe more. They're not taking any chances. Daniel's voice remained calm, professional, but Elena could hear the underlying tension. These aren't corporate security guards, Elena. These are military contractors with combat experience and unlimited resources. Elena felt her pulse quicken, but not with fear, with the kind of anticipation that came when everything she had built was about to be tested in the crucible of real conflict. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them. The facility's defense systems activated with mechanical precision blast doors sealing corridors and automated turrets emerging from concealed positions. But Elena knew that conventional defenses wouldn't be enough against the force that was coming for them. "Dr. Chen," she said, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "Can Aurora be used defensively?" "Theoretically, yes. The energy field can be configured to create a protective barrier around the facility, but we've never tested it at that scale." Dr. Chen's fingers flew over holographic controls, bringing up schematics that showed Aurora's defensive capabilities. "The power requirements would be enormous, and if something goes wrong, then we'll improvise." Elena's smile was sharp, predatory. "Daniel, what do you need from me?" "I need you to coordinate the technical aspects while I handle the tactical response." Daniel was already strapping on body armor, his transformation from corporate husband to battlefield commander complete. "Elena, once the shooting starts, stay in the command center. Promise me." "I'm not hiding while you—" "This isn't about hiding. This is about making sure someone survives to tell the world what the consortium has been doing." Daniel caught her hands, his eyes intense with an emotion that was part love, part desperation. "Elena, if something happens to me, if they breach the facility, you have to get the Aurora data to the media. Everything we've discovered about the consortium, all the evidence of their operations, it dies with us if you don't survive." Elena felt tears threatening, but she forced them back through sheer will. "Nothing is going to happen to you. We're going to win this." "I know we are." Daniel's smile was soft, tender, completely at odds with the weapons he was now carrying. "But just in case, I need you to know that these past 2 days have been the best of my life. Meeting you, marrying you, falling in love with you, and none of it was part of any plan. It was just the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." Before Elena could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow as Dr. Chen's voice echoed from the speakers. "Contact multiple aircraft approaching from the south. Ground vehicles confirmed on all access roads. They'll be in range in less than 5 minutes." Daniel kissed Elena, then hard and desperate, and full of everything they might not have time to say. When they broke apart, his eyes held hers for one last moment, before he became someone else entirely, the Special Forces commander who had survived impossible missions in hostile territory. "Remember," he said, backing toward the tactical command station, "Aurora is our ace in the hole. Don't play it too early." Elena watched him disappear into the maze of corridors that led to the facility's defensive positions, then turned her attention to the Aurora generator. The crystalline structure pulsed with increasing intensity, its energy field expanding outward in waves that she could feel in her chest. "Dr. Chen, show me everything Aurora can do. Offensive, defensive, whatever you've theorized, but never tested." Elena's voice carried the authority that had built empires. "Tonight, we find out what this technology is really capable of." The next few minutes passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Elena coordinated with the facility's automated defense systems, while Dr. Chen ran diagnostics on Aurora's untested capabilities. Outside, the sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, accompanied by the rumble of heavy vehicles converging on their position. "Mrs. Cross," Dr. Chen said, her voice barely audible over the growing noise, "I'm reading massive electromagnetic signatures from the approaching forces. They're carrying equipment specifically designed to disrupt Aurora's field generation." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. They came prepared. More than prepared. They know exactly how Aurora works, which means Richard gave them everything. Elena's voice was flat, emotionless, but her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How long before they're in position?" 60 seconds. Elena activated the facility's communication system, her voice broadcasting to every corner of the complex. "This is Elena Cross. In 1 minute, this facility will be under attack by forces that want to steal technology that could change the world. We have 2 choices: we can surrender and watch everything we've built be perverted into a tool of oppression, or we can fight. I know what I'm choosing." She paused, looking at the Aurora generator that had become the focal point of a war she never wanted but was determined to win. "To every person in this facility, I want you to know that what we do tonight will determine whether Aurora becomes humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest threat. We're not just fighting for a company or a technology. We're fighting for the future itself." The first explosion rocked the facility before she could say more, the lights flickering as something detonated against the outer defenses. Elena felt the concussion in her bones, felt the very foundations of the building shake with the force of the assault. "They're not wasting time," Dr. Chen said grimly, watching tactical displays that showed the consortium forces establishing firing positions around the perimeter. "Daniel was right about their numbers. I'm counting at least 50 hostiles, maybe more." Elena activated Aurora's defensive protocols, watching as the energy field expanded outward from the generator like a ripple in reality itself. Where the field intersected with the facility's walls, strange distortions appeared at spaces where the very concept of solidity seemed negotiable. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen breathed, studying readouts that defied conventional physics. "The field is creating localized space-time distortions. Projectiles entering the field are being deflected along non-Euclidean trajectories." In English, Doctor. "Aurora is bending space around the facility. Bullets can't find us because we're not exactly where we appear to be." Another explosion, this one closer, followed by the staccato sound of automatic weapons fire. Elena could hear Daniel's voice over the tactical communication system, calm and professional, as he coordinated the facility's defensive response. "Contact on the eastern perimeter. Multiple hostiles with heavy weapons. Aurora field is holding, but they're adapting their approach." Elena watched the tactical displays, seeing the consortium forces probing for weaknesses with the systematic thoroughness of professional soldiers. They had come prepared for a conventional assault, but Aurora was making conventional tactics irrelevant. "Mrs. Cross," Dr. Chen said urgently, "the field is stable, but it's drawing enormous amounts of power. At this rate, we'll exhaust our reserves within the hour." "Then we need to end this quickly." Elena studied the enemy positions, her strategic mind cataloging vulnerabilities and opportunities. "Dr. Chen, can Aurora generate an offensive pulse, something to disable their equipment?" "Theoretically, but the energy requirements would be, do it." Dr. Chen's hands flew over the controls, configuring Aurora for an application that existed only in theoretical models. The generator's crystalline structure began to resonate at a new frequency, its light shifting from blue-white to something deeper, more ominous. "Charging offensive matrix," Dr. Chen announced. 30 seconds to full power. Elena felt the facility shake again as the consortium forces intensified their assault. Through the facility's external cameras, she could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, could see figures in tactical gear moving with military precision as they attempted to breach defenses that were becoming increasingly irrelevant. "Elena," Daniel's voice crackled over the communication system. "They're bringing up something big, some kind of energy weapon that's designed to disrupt Aurora's field." Elena's blood ran cold. "How long do we have?" 2 minutes, maybe less." "Dr. Chen, whatever you're going to do it now." The Aurora generator reached critical power, its energy field expanding outward in a pulse that seemed to slow time itself. Elena watched the tactical displays with held breath as the pulse encountered the consortium forces, washing over their positions like a wave of invisible force. The effect was immediate and devastating. Electronic equipment failed across the entire perimeter, vehicles died where they stood, and communications went silent as every piece of technology within half a mile of the facility simply stopped working. In the sudden quiet that followed, Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Dr. Chen's amazed laughter, could hear Daniel's voice over the hardened communication system that had somehow survived Aurora's pulse. "Jesus Christ," he said, and Elena had never heard profanity sound so much like a prayer. "Elena, what did you just do?" "I ended the fight." Elena's voice was steady, certain, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Dr. Chen's status report. Aurora field is stable and holding. The pulse drained approximately 60% of our power reserves, but we're still operational." Dr. Chen studied her instruments with the fascination of a scientist who had just witnessed something unprecedented. "Mrs. Cross, we've just demonstrated a defensive capability that makes conventional warfare obsolete." Elena felt a moment of triumph followed immediately by the realization that they had only won the first round. The consortium had resources that extended far beyond a single assault team, and now they knew exactly what Aurora was capable of. "Daniel," she said into the communication system, "what's the situation out there?" 43 hostile cells confirmed down or disabled. No casualties on our side." Daniel's voice carried a note of amazement that he couldn't quite suppress. "Elena, most of them are still alive, just unconscious. Whatever Aurora did, it was precise enough to disable without killing." Elena felt relief wash over her. She had been prepared to fight a war, but she hadn't wanted to become a mass murderer in the process. "Secure the perimeter and gather intelligence from their equipment. I want to know everything about their operation, who sent them, how they're funded, what other targets they have planned." "Already on it. But Elena, there's something else you need to see." Elena made her way through the facility's corridors past blast doors that had sealed automatically and defensive positions that had proven unnecessary. The Aurora field still hummed around them, creating subtle distortions in the air that made everything feel slightly unreal. She found Daniel on the facility's main observation deck, looking out over a scene that belonged in a science fiction movie. The consortium's assault force lay scattered across the perimeter, their vehicles and equipment dark and silent under the Montana stars. But it was what Daniel was holding that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. "Recognizing the signature on these orders?" he asked, handing her a tactical tablet that had survived Aurora's pulse because of its hardened construction. Elena read the operational briefing with growing horror and rage. The assault on the Montana facility was designated as Phase 2 of something called Operation Blackout. Phase 1 had been the elimination of Victor Cross. Phase 3 was scheduled for dawn. "They're going after Titan Defense Headquarters," Elena whispered. "Every board member, every senior executive, everyone who knows about Aurora." "It gets worse." Daniel pulled up additional files that painted a picture of systematic elimination. "They're not just planning to steal Aurora. They're planning to destroy everyone connected to it, then blame the entire incident on foreign terrorists." Elena felt the pieces clicking together in her mind, felt the full scope of the consortium's plan becoming clear. "They're going to frame us as traitors, make it look like we sold Aurora to enemies of the state. And Richard Blackwood will be the sole survivor, the patriotic board member who tried to stop the conspiracy but arrived too late." Daniel's voice was grim. "He'll take control of Titan Defense, hand Aurora over to the consortium, and be hailed as a hero for saving American technology from foreign influence." Elena stared out at the disabled assault force, her mind racing through implications and contingencies. The consortium had planned for every eventuality except the one that had actually occurred, Aurora proving to be more powerful than even they had imagined. "How long before they realize this assault failed?" she asked. "Phase 3 is scheduled to begin at dawn. When this team doesn't report in..." Daniel checked his watch. "We have maybe 4 hours before they realize something went wrong and adapt their timeline. Then we have 4 hours to save everyone at Titan Defense and expose the consortium before they can disappear back into the shadows." Elena felt familiar energy building in her chest, the kind of focused determination that had built empires. "Dr. Chen, can Aurora be transported quickly?" "Not quickly enough to beat them to New York," Dr. Chen replied through the communication system. "But Mrs. Cross, Aurora doesn't need to be physically present to be effective." Elena felt hope spark in her chest. "Explain." "The quantum entanglement field can be projected across vast distances using existing communication infrastructure. With the right modifications, we could project Aurora's defensive capabilities to any location with sufficient network connectivity. Like Titan Defense Headquarters." "Exactly." Elena looked at Daniel, seeing her own desperate hope reflected in his eyes. "How long would that take?" 2 hours to modify the projection array, maybe 3 to establish a stable connection." Dr. Chen's voice carried the excitement of a scientist on the verge of a breakthrough. "But Mrs. Cross, the power requirements would be enormous. We'd be draining Aurora's reserves completely." "Do it!" Elena's voice cut through the night air with absolute authority. "Daniel, I need you to contact Thompson and anyone else at headquarters you trust, absolutely. Warn them about what's coming, get them to safety if possible. Elena, if we're projecting Aurora's field to New York, someone needs to coordinate the technical aspects from that end." Daniel's expression was grim. "Someone who understands the technology and can adapt to changing circumstances." Elena felt ice form in her stomach as she realized what he was suggesting. "You want me to go to New York? You want me to walk into the middle of a war zone? I want you to save the lives of everyone we care about." Daniel moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "Elena, you're the only person who knows both the corporate side and the technical side well enough to make this work. What about you? I'll stay here, coordinate Aurora's projection, and make sure the consortium doesn't have any more surprises waiting for us." Daniel's smile was soft, tender, completely at odds with the weapons he still carried and the battlefield surrounding them. "Elena, this is what your grandfather trained you for. This is why he built Titan Defense, why he developed Aurora, why he brought us together." Elena felt tears threatening, felt the weight of responsibility and love and desperate fear all crushing down on her at once. "Daniel, if something goes wrong, if the projection fails or the consortium adapts faster than we anticipate, then we'll face it together, even if we're 1,000 miles apart." Daniel kissed her forehead, the gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Elena, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If the worst happens, if we don't both survive this night, promise me you'll remember that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life." Daniel's voice was soft, intimate, the kind of tone reserved for confessions and promises. "Promise me you'll know that every moment we've had together has been worth whatever comes next." Elena kissed him, then pouring all her love and fear and desperate hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked into his eyes and saw her own fierce determination reflected there. "I promise," she whispered. "But Daniel, I'm making you a promise too. We're both going to survive this. We're going to win, and we're going to have the life you talked about. The normal arguments about dinner, the waking up together every morning, all of it. I'd like that very much." Elena stepped back, feeling the familiar transformation as she shifted from vulnerable woman to corporate predator. Then let's make it happen. Dr. Chen begin the modifications. Daniel coordinate with our people in New York. I want options, contingencies, and backup plans for the backup plans. As the facility erupted into controlled activity, Elena found herself standing at the center of a technological miracle that was about to be tested beyond anything its creators had ever imagined. Aurora pulsed with otherworldly energy, beautiful and terrible and powerful enough to reshape the world. In less than 4 hours, it would either save the lives of everyone she cared about or watch them die in a conspiracy that stretched back decades. The consortium had planned for every eventuality except the one that mattered most. They had underestimated the woman who had built an empire through sheer will and the man who loved her enough to risk everything for her safety. The war for Aurora was about to reach its climax, and Elena Cross had never been more determined to win. 2 hours later, Elena found herself in the cargo bay of a military transport aircraft that Daniel had somehow requisitioned through channels that officially didn't exist. The plane cut through the darkness toward New York at speeds that should have been impossible for conventional aircraft, while behind them, Aurora's modified projection array reached across the continent like an invisible hand. Projection array is online and stable. Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the encrypted communication system. Mrs. Cross, you should have access to Aurora's defensive capabilities within 15 minutes of reaching Titan Defense Headquarters. Elena studied the tactical displays on her tablet, watching as dots representing consortium forces converged on Manhattan from multiple directions. They had moved up their timeline probably in response to the failed assault in Montana, and were now less than an hour away from beginning their final assault. Thompson, she said into her secure phone, please tell me you've evacuated the building. Mrs. Cross, with respect, evacuating would just make us easier targets. Thompson's voice was steady, professional, the tone of a man who had faced hostile fire before. We've secured the building and prepared defensive positions. If they want Titan defense, they're going to have to take it floor by floor. Elena felt pride and terror warring in her chest. Thompson and the security team were good, but they were facing military contractors with overwhelming firepower and government backing. Thompson Aurora will be projecting a defensive field around the building, but I need you to understand something. The technology is experimental and we're pushing it beyond anything it was designed for. If something goes wrong, then we'll adapt and overcome, ma'am. Just like always. Elena smiled despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and the knowledge that she was about to walk into a war zone. Thompson represented everything good about Titan defense, loyalty, competence, and the kind of courage that couldn't be bought or corrupted. ETA to Manhattan is 30 minutes, the pilot announced over the aircraft's intercom. Mrs. Cross, you should know that we're seeing significant military activity in the airspace around New York. Multiple helicopters, possibly armed. Elena felt her pulse quicken. The consortium wasn't taking any chances this time. They were bringing overwhelming force to bear enough to level city blocks, if necessary. Daniel, she said into the communication system, status report on Aurora's projection. Field generation is stable and building strength. Elena, the quantum entanglement array, is performing beyond our most optimistic projections. Daniel's voice carried a note of amazement that he couldn't quite suppress. We're essentially creating a localized pocket of altered physics around Titan Defense Headquarters. Will it hold? Against conventional weapons, absolutely. Against whatever specialized equipment the consortium might have developed specifically to counter Aurora. Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. We're about to find out. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. Everyone at Titan Defense was depending on her. Dr. Chen and her team in Montana were depending on her. Daniel, the man she loved more than she had ever thought possible, was depending on her. Most importantly, the future of technology that could either save the world or destroy it was depending on her ability to outthink enemies who had been planning this assault for years. When she opened her eyes, Elena Cross was no longer the woman who had fallen in love with her mysterious husband. She was the predator who had built an empire through ruthless intelligence and uncompromising will. The consortium wanted a war. She would give them one they would never forget. The aircraft began its descent toward a private airfield on the outskirts of Manhattan, its engines screaming as the pilot pushed the aircraft to its limits. Through the small windows, Elena could see the lights of the city spreading out below, like a galaxy of possibilities, beautiful and fragile, and completely unaware of the battle being fought for its future. "Mrs. Cross," Thompson's voice crackled through the communication system. "We have visual confirmation of hostile aircraft approaching from the south. Multiple helicopters, at least 6, probably more." Elena felt time slowing down, felt the familiar clarity that came when everything she had built was about to be tested in the crucible of real conflict. "Thompson, get everyone to defensive positions. Aurora's field should be active within 10 minutes. "Copy that. Mrs. Cross, whatever you and your husband have planned now would be a good time." Elena looked at the tablet displaying Aurora's status, watching as energy levels climbed toward the critical threshold needed for long-distance projection. The technology that had started as her grandfather's secret project was about to become humanity's first defense against forces that treated nations like chess pieces. "Daniel," she said softly, "initiate final projection sequence." "Initiating now. Elena, once this field goes active, there's no hiding what Aurora can do. Every intelligence agency on the planet will know that we've achieved something that should be impossible." "Let them know." Elena's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "After tonight, the world is going to be a very different place." The aircraft touched down with a jolt that reminded Elena that she was no longer safe in the theoretical realm of corporate strategy. This was real, immediate, and deadly. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see vehicles approaching at high speed, some friendly, some almost certainly not. "Mrs. Cross," the pilot announced, "your escort is here, but so is someone else. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east, and they're not on our approved list." Elena gathered her equipment with the efficiency of someone who had learned to plan for every contingency. "Thompson, I'm 5 minutes out. Status on those helicopters." 4 minutes to contact. "Mrs. Cross, they're not just approaching, they're establishing firing positions around the building. This isn't going to be a quick assault. They're planning to lay siege." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. A siege meant civilians could be caught in crossfire, meant the battle could spill out into the streets of Manhattan. "Thompson, coordinate with NYPD and emergency services. I want civilians evacuated from a 6-block radius around headquarters." "Already in progress, ma'am. But Mrs. Cross, the authorities are asking questions we can't answer. They want to know why we're treating this like a military operation on American soil." Elena closed her eyes, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. "Tell them the truth, Thompson. Tell them that Titan Defense is under attack by forces with government backing, and that we're using experimental technology to defend ourselves. Tell them that after tonight, they're going to need to rewrite the textbooks on what's possible." As the aircraft came to a complete stop, Elena could hear the sound of approaching helicopters growing louder. Through the communication system, she could hear Daniel's voice coordinating Aurora's final preparations, could hear Dr. Chen running diagnostics on systems that were about to be pushed beyond their theoretical limits. "Elena," Daniel said, his voice soft and intimate, despite the chaos surrounding them. "Aurora field projection will be active in 60 seconds. Are you ready?" Elena stepped toward the aircraft's exit, feeling the night air of New York wash over her like a promise. Somewhere in the darkness, above military contractors, were preparing to assault the building where she had spent years building an empire. Somewhere in Montana, the man she loved was risking everything to protect technology that could reshape the world. And somewhere in the shadows, the consortium was about to learn that they had underestimated the most dangerous opponent they had ever faced. "I'm ready," she said simply. The war for Aurora was about to reach its climax, and Elena Cross had come home to fight. The armored vehicle carrying Elena through the streets of Manhattan felt like a missile hurtling toward destiny, its reinforced windows offering glimpses of a city that had no idea it was about to witness the birth of a new age. Behind them, the private airfield erupted in gunfire as consortium forces engaged the security team Daniel had arranged. But Elena's focus was entirely on the 40-story tower ahead, where everything she had built waited in darkness. "Aurora field projection active in 30 seconds. Daniel's voice crackled through the secure communication system, and Elena could hear the controlled tension beneath his calm professionalism. Elena, energy levels are exceeding all theoretical projections. Whatever happens next, it's going to rewrite physics textbooks." Elena pressed her hand against the window, watching Titan Defense Headquarters grow larger in her vision. 40 floors of glass and steel that housed thousands of employees, decades of research and secrets that nations would kill for. In less than a minute, it would become the epicenter of a battle that would determine whether humanity's greatest technological achievement became a tool of liberation or oppression. "Thompson," she said into her radio final status report. "Perimeter secured all personnel in defensive positions. Mrs. Cross, we have visual confirmation on 8 attack helicopters establishing firing positions. Ground forces are massing 2 blocks out, probably waiting for the air assault to soften us up." Thompson's voice carried the steady confidence of a man who had faced impossible odds before. Whatever Aurora is going to do now would be an excellent time. Elena felt her pulse synchronize with the countdown in her earpiece. 10 seconds to field activation. Through the vehicle's reinforced windows, she could see muzzle flashes in the darkness above as consortium helicopters began their attack runs. Conventional rockets and machine gun fire streaked toward Titan Defense Headquarters, deadly streams of light that should have turned the building into rubble. Instead, something impossible happened. The Aurora field manifested as a shimmering distortion around the entire 40-story tower, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, but shot through with threads of otherworldly light. As the consortium's weapons encountered the field, they simply stopped. Rockets hung suspended in mid-air, their trajectories frozen as they encountered space that refused to behave according to normal physics. Machine gun rounds curved away from the building in graceful arcs, as if the very concept of straight line had become negotiable. "Jesus Christ," Thompson breathed over the radio. "Mrs. Cross, what am I looking at?" "The future," Elena replied, watching in awe as her grandfather's greatest achievement transformed the Manhattan skyline into something from a dream. Thompson Aurora has created a localized distortion in space-time around the building. Conventional weapons can't reach us because we're not exactly where we appear to be. The consortium pilots, trained professionals who had probably seen combat on every continent, responded to the impossible with admirable adaptability. They broke off their attack runs and established holding patterns, their voices crackling over intercepted radio frequencies as they reported the failure of conventional weapons to their commanders. "All units abort direct assault. Repeat, abort direct assault. Target is protected by unknown defensive technology. Requesting guidance from command." Elena's vehicle screeched to a halt in the building's underground garage, where Thompson and his security team waited with the kind of grim determination that had made them legends in corporate security circles. As Elena emerged from the armored car, she could feel Aurora's field humming around them, a presence that made the air itself seem more substantial. "Mrs. Cross?" Thompson said, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and amazement. "I've seen a lot of things in 30 years of security work, but this..." He gestured toward the ceiling, where the Aurora field created subtle distortions that made everything look slightly unreal. "This is something else entirely." "It's something my grandfather died protecting," Elena replied, moving toward the private elevator that would take her to the executive floors. "Thompson, the field will hold against conventional weapons, but the consortium isn't going to give up. They'll adapt, find new approaches, maybe even bring in specialized equipment designed to counter Aurora. Then we'd better use the time we have wisely." Thompson fell into step beside her as they entered the elevator. "Mrs. Cross, there's something else you need to know. We've been monitoring police and emergency frequencies. The authorities are mobilizing a massive response, but they're being fed information that paints us as the aggressors." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. Richard's work has to be. The official story is that Titan Defense has been compromised by foreign agents that were using stolen technology to hold the building hostage. Thompson's expression was grim. "They're painting you as a traitor who sold out to enemy governments." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of betrayal and conspiracy crushing down on her shoulders. Richard Blackwood, her grandfather's oldest friend, had not only arranged Victor Cross's murder, but was now orchestrating Elena's destruction with the thoroughness of someone who had planned every detail for years. "How long before federal agencies arrive?" she asked. "Based on radio traffic, maybe an hour. But Mrs. Cross, they're not coming to negotiate. They're coming with military-grade equipment and orders to retake the building by force." Elena stepped out of the elevator into the executive suite that had been her kingdom for years, now transformed by Aurora's field into something that existed at the intersection of science and magic. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the consortium helicopters maintaining their holding pattern, their pilots undoubtedly reporting to commanders who were struggling to understand how their overwhelming firepower had been rendered useless. "Daniel," she said into the communication system, "status report on Aurora's power consumption. Field projection is stable, but we're burning through energy reserves faster than anticipated." Daniel's voice carried the controlled urgency of a man monitoring systems pushed beyond their design limits. "Elena, at current consumption rates, we have maybe 2 hours before Aurora's power cells are exhausted." 2 hours to expose a conspiracy that had been decades in the making. 2 hours to prove that the real traitors were the ones calling her a traitor. 2 hours to save not just her own life but the lives of everyone who had trusted her to lead Titan Defense into the future. Elena moved to her office computer, her fingers flying over keys as she accessed files that could bring down governments. "Thompson, I need you to coordinate with Dr. Chen. We're going to broadcast everything financial records communication intercepts evidence of the consortium's operations. Every news network, every social media platform, every government database we can access. Mrs. Cross, that's going to take time we might not have." "Then we make time." Elena pulled up the files that her grandfather had died protecting, the evidence that would expose Richard Blackwood and the consortium to the world. Thompson, Aurora isn't just a defensive technology. It's also the most powerful transmitter ever created. "Dr. Chen, are you monitoring?" "Yes, Mrs. Cross. Aurora's quantum field can carry information as well as deflect weapons. If we modulate the field correctly, we could broadcast to every electronic device in the city simultaneously." Elena felt hope sparking in her chest. "Do it. I want every phone, every computer, every television in New York to receive our evidence. Make it impossible for the consortium to control the narrative, as Dr. Ballon Chen began the complex process of modulating Aurora's field for information transmission. Elena found herself standing at the windows of her office, looking out over a city that was about to learn the truth about forces that had shaped its destiny from the shadows. Elena. Daniel's voice was soft, intimate, cutting through the technical chatter with the kind of tenderness that made her heart ache. Are you all right? I'm about to expose my grandfather's oldest friend as a murderer and traitor. I'm surrounded by military contractors who want to kill me, and federal agents are probably going to arrest me for treason within the hour. Elena pressed her hand against the glass, feeling Aurora's field humming through her fingertips. But yes, I'm all right. For the first time in days, I feel like we're finally fighting back instead of just reacting. Elena, there's something else. The consortium forces in Montana have regrouped and are moving toward our position. They've brought equipment specifically designed to disrupt Aurora's quantum field. Elena felt her breath catch. How long do we have? 3 hours, maybe 4, before they reach firing range. But Elena, if they succeed in disrupting Aurora's field while you're still in New York, the federal agents will storm the building. The consortium will claim we resisted arrest, and everyone inside will be killed in the crossfire. Elena completed the thought with the kind of strategic clarity that had built empires. How quickly can Aurora's evidence broadcast reach full saturation? Dr. Chen estimates 90 minutes for complete metropolitan coverage. Elena did the math, weighing risks and possibilities with the analytical mind that had made her one of the most feared negotiators in corporate America. Not enough time. We need to buy ourselves more. How? Elena turned from the window, her mind racing through contingencies and desperate gambits. Outside the consortium, helicopters were being joined by additional aircraft military transports that probably carried specialized equipment and fresh assault teams. The siege was intensifying, and conventional wisdom suggested that Elena's position was hopeless. But Elena Cross had never been particularly interested in conventional wisdom. Thompson, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had made senators reconsider their positions. I need you to contact Richard Blackwood. Mrs. Cross, with respect, that man is, the key to everything. Elena moved to her desk, pulling up financial records that painted a picture of corruption spanning decades. Thompson, Richard thinks he's won. He thinks Aurora is trapped, that I'm cornered, that all he has to do is wait for federal agents to finish what his mercenaries started. And he's wrong. Elena's smile was sharp, predatory, the expression of a woman who had just found her enemy's weakness. Thompson, tell Richard that I want to negotiate. Tell him I'm willing to surrender Aurora in exchange for safe passage for my employees. Thompson stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Mrs. Cross, you can't seriously be considering... I'm considering winning this war by fighting it on terms Richard doesn't understand. Elena activated her computer's secure communication protocols, preparing to place a call that would either save everyone she cared about or destroy them all. Thompson Richard's weakness has always been his ego. He needs to believe that he's smarter than everyone else, that he's planned for every contingency. What if he has? Then we're about to find out. Elena looked at the screen displaying Aurora's power levels, watching the energy reserves tick downward with mathematical precision. But Thompson, I'm betting that Richard made the same mistake every brilliant strategist makes eventually. He planned for the enemy he expected to face, not the enemy I actually am. Elena placed the call that would change everything. Her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what she was risking. After 3 rings, Richard Blackwood's familiar voice filled her office, carrying the kind of satisfaction that came from watching decades of planning reach fruition. Elena, my dear, Richard said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I was wondering when you would call to discuss terms. Hello, Richard. I assume you're watching the news coverage of my supposed treason. Excellent work, don't you think? The story practically writes itself ambitious. CEO becomes radicalized, sells military secrets to foreign powers, uses stolen technology to hold Manhattan hostage. Richard's laugh was warm, grandfatherly, completely at odds with the monstrous reality of what he had orchestrated. Your grandfather would be proud of the dramatic flair, if not the cause. Elena felt rage building in her chest, but she forced her voice to remain calm, professional. Richard, you killed him. Your oldest friend, your business partner for 20 years. You murdered my grandfather for Aurora. I saved Aurora from your grandfather's naive idealism. Richard's tone shifted, becoming harder, more serious. Elena Victor could never see the bigger picture. He thought Aurora should be used to protect people, to defend against aggression. He never understood that the real power comes from controlling who gets protected and who doesn't. And you think the consortium should make those decisions? I think people like us should make those decisions. People who understand that power exists to be used, not to be hoarded by old men with outdated moral compasses. Richard paused, and Elena could hear voices in the background, probably consortium commanders updating him on the siege. But Elena, we're not having this conversation, so I can justify myself to you. We're having it because you're trapped, your technology is failing, and you need to discuss the terms of your surrender. Elena looked at the tactical displays showing consortium forces surrounding the building, watched Aurora's power levels continue. Their inexorable decline felt the weight of responsibility for hundreds of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Everything Richard said was true. She was trapped, outgunned, and running out of time, which was exactly where she wanted him to think she was. You're right, she said, injecting defeat into her voice with the skill of someone who had negotiated with world leaders. Richard, Aurora is burning through power faster than we anticipated. The field will collapse within 2 hours, and when it does, federal agents will retake the building, discover evidence of your treason, and unfortunately, you'll be killed while resisting arrest. Richard's voice was sympathetic, understanding the tone of a grandfather explaining harsh realities to a beloved child. Elena, it doesn't have to end that way. Surrender Aurora to us now, and I guarantee safe passage for your employees. You have my word. Your word. Elena's laugh was bitter, broken. The word of the man who murdered my grandfather. The word of the man who can still save your life. Richard's voice hardened. Elena, sentiment is a luxury you can't afford. Your grandfather's dead, Aurora belongs to us, and your only choice is whether your employees die with you or live to find new jobs. Elena closed her eyes, feeling tears of rage and frustration threatening to overwhelm her. When she spoke, her voice was small, defeated, exactly what Richard needed to hear. What do you want me to do? Deactivate Aurora's defensive field. Allow federal agents to enter the building peacefully. Surrender yourself and the Aurora technology without resistance. Richard's voice carried the satisfaction of a man who had just achieved total victory. Do this, and I promise that your employees will be treated as unwilling victims of your radicalization rather than co-conspirators. And me, you'll be afforded all the protections due to an American citizen facing charges of treason. Richard's pause was telling. Elena, you're intelligent enough to understand what that means. Elena understood perfectly. She would disappear into the federal justice system, probably dying in custody under mysterious circumstances, while Richard and the consortium claimed Aurora as a patriotic victory against foreign espionage. I need guarantees, she said, letting desperation creep into her voice. Signed documents, official assurances that my people won't be prosecuted. Of course, I'll have the appropriate paperwork prepared within the hour. Richard's voice was warm again, kindly, the tone of a man who had just achieved everything he wanted. Elena, you're making the right choice. Your grandfather would be proud of you for putting your people's welfare above your own pride. Elena felt bile rising in her throat, but she forced herself to maintain the charade. Richard, I'll need time to coordinate the shutdown with my technical team. Aurora's systems are complex, and if we don't deactivate them properly... How much time? 90 minutes? Maybe 2 hours. You have 90 minutes, Elena. Not a second more. Richard's voice carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. And Elena, don't try anything clever. I've planned for every contingency you might imagine. The call ended, leaving Elena alone with the silence of her office and the weight of what she had just set in motion. Through the windows, she could see the consortium helicopters maintaining their holding pattern, their pilots probably receiving new orders based on her conversation with Richard. Thompson, she said into her radio. How much of that did you monitor? All of it, Mrs. Cross. Thompson's voice was grim. Are you really planning to surrender? I'm planning to give Richard exactly what he expects, a beaten CEO who's run out of options and time. Elena moved to her computer, her fingers flying over keys as she accessed Aurora's core systems. Thompson, in 90 minutes, Aurora's defensive field is going to collapse. When it does, federal agents are going to storm this building with orders to arrest everyone inside. Then we'd better be ready for them. No, Thompson. We'd better not be here when they arrive. Elena pulled up building schematics that showed maintenance tunnels, service corridors, and emergency evacuation routes that most people had forgotten existed. Thompson, how quickly can you evacuate all personnel through the basement levels? 60 minutes, maybe 70 if we're careful about it. Do it. Get everyone out, make sure they're safe, and then coordinate with Dr. Chen on the evidence broadcast. Elena's voice carried the kind of authority that had built empires. Thompson, when Aurora's field collapses, I want this building to be empty except for me. Mrs. Cross, you can't seriously be planning to face federal agents alone. I'm planning to face Richard alone. Elena's smile was sharp, predatory, the expression of a woman who had just found the perfect trap for her enemy. Thompson Richard made one critical mistake in his planning. He assumed that I would fight to save Aurora, that I would sacrifice everything to protect the technology. Aren't you? No. I'm fighting to destroy the consortium, and Aurora is just the weapon I'm going to use to do it. Elena activated emergency protocols that began systematically downloading Aurora's complete technical specifications to secure servers around the world. Thompson, once this evidence broadcast completes, every intelligence agency on the planet will have detailed plans for Aurora technology. The consortium's monopoly ends tonight, whether they realize it or not. Thompson stared at her with the kind of amazement reserved for moments when the impossible becomes inevitable. Mrs. Cross, you're not just planning to expose them. You're planning to democratize Aurora. I'm planning to fulfill my grandfather's real vision for this technology, not as a tool of control, but as a shield that anyone can build, anyone can use, anyone can improve upon. Elena looked at the progress indicators showing the evidence broadcast reaching saturation levels across the metropolitan area. Thompson, by morning, Aurora won't belong to Titan Defense or the consortium or any government. It will belong to humanity. As Thompson began coordinating the evacuation of Titan Defense personnel, Elena found herself alone in the office where her journey had begun just days earlier. Through the windows, she could see a city that was about to wake up to a new reality where the rules of warfare and power had been permanently rewritten. Daniel, she said into the communication system status report on the Montana situation. Consortium forces are 2 hours out, maybe less. Elena, they're bringing everything electronic warfare equipment, electromagnetic pulse weapons, even some kind of exotic particle beam that's designed to disrupt quantum fields. Daniel's voice carried the controlled urgency of a man coordinating a defense against overwhelming odds. We can hold them off for a while, but eventually they're going to break through. They don't need to break through. They just need to arrive. Elena pulled up a final set of files on her computer documents that would complete the destruction of Richard Blackwood and the consortium. Daniel, once the evidence broadcast completes, Aurora's real purpose will be fulfilled. The technology will be public, the consortium will be exposed, and Richard will be revealed as the traitor he's always been. What about us? Elena felt her heart skip at the question, felt love and fear and desperate hope all tangled together in a knot of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Daniel, in about an hour, this building is going to be stormed by federal agents who think they're arresting a traitor. I need you to promise me something. Elena, don't promise me that no matter what happens here, no matter what the news reports say about me, you'll remember that everything we did was to protect something bigger than ourselves. Elena's voice was soft, intimate, the kind of tone reserved for confessions and promises. Promise me you'll remember that loving you has been the greatest gift of my life. Elena, you're talking like this is goodbye. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But Daniel, I need you to know that if I don't survive what's coming next, it won't be because I gave up. It will be because I finally found something worth dying for. Elena pressed her hand against the window, feeling Aurora's field humming through her fingertips. And if I do survive, if we both make it through this night, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret falling in love with a woman crazy enough to take on the most powerful conspiracy in the world. Elena, I love you, Daniel Reed. Whatever name you used before, whatever life you had before you became my husband. I love the man you chose to become when you chose to protect me. Elena felt tears threatening, but she forced them back through sheer will. Now help me save the world. As Elena began the final phase of her plan, uploading files that would expose decades of conspiracy and corruption, she felt something she had never experienced before. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do, with exactly the right person fighting beside her, even though they were 1,000 miles apart. The war for Aurora was about to reach its climax, and Elena Cross had never been more ready to face whatever came next. In 30 minutes, Richard Blackwood would walk into the biggest trap of his life. In 90 minutes, Aurora's defensive field would collapse and federal agents would storm the building. In 2 hours, the consortium would learn whether their decades of planning could withstand the fury of a woman who had finally found something worth fighting for. The future of human civilization hung in the balance, and Elena Cross was exactly where she had always belonged, at the center of the storm, refusing to surrender, ready to change the world or die trying. The countdown to Aurora's collapse had reached 30 minutes when Elena heard the distinctive sound of Richard Blackwood's private helicopter touching down on Titan Defense's rooftop helipad. Through her office windows, she watched him emerge from the aircraft with the confident stride of a man who believed he had orchestrated the perfect victory, flanked by federal agents, whose body language suggested they saw themselves as patriots about to arrest a traitor. Mrs. Cross, Thompson's voice crackled through her earpiece. Building evacuation is complete. All personnel are clear and safe, but ma'am, I'm not leaving you alone with that monster. Yes, you are, Thompson. That's an order. Elena's voice carried the authority that had built empires, but underneath it was a warmth that spoke of genuine affection for the man who had protected her for years. Thompson, What I'm about to do requires someone Richard trusts completely, someone he believes is too broken to be dangerous. And if something goes wrong, then you make sure the world knows the truth about Aurora and the consortium. Elena moved to her desk, pulling out a small device that looked like an ordinary smartphone, but contained technology that would make intelligence agencies weep with envy. Thompson Dr. Chen's evidence broadcast reaches full saturation in 15 minutes. After that, every major news network, every government database, every social media platform on Earth will have complete documentation of the consortium's operations. Elena could hear the elevator ascending toward the executive floor, carrying Richard and his federal escort toward a confrontation that would determine whether humanity's greatest technological achievement became a tool of liberation or oppression. Her hands were steady as she activated Aurora's final protocols programs that her grandfather had embedded in the system's deepest levels. "Daniel," she said softly into the communication system. "Are you monitoring?" "Every second, Elena. Aurora's power levels are critical, but the field is holding." Daniel's voice carried a mixture of love and desperation that made her heart ache. "Elena, once that field collapses, I won't be able to protect you from here." "You've already protected me, Daniel. More than you know." Elena felt tears threatening, but she forced them back through sheer will. "Daniel, whatever happens in the next few minutes, I need you to remember something. These past few days have been the most real, the most alive I've ever felt. Falling in love with you, fighting beside you, building something together that's bigger than either of us alone, it's been perfect. Elena, don't talk like this is goodbye. Maybe it isn't. Maybe we'll have that normal life you talked about, the arguments about dinner and waking up together every morning." Elena's smile was soft, tender, completely at odds with the war zone surrounding her. "But Daniel, if something goes wrong, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." The office doors opened with the soft hiss of pneumatic systems, and Richard Blackwood entered with the commanding presence that had made him one of the most respected figures in American defense contracting. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a distinguished gentleman in his 70s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, the kind of man who had dinner with senators and played golf with generals. Behind him came 4 federal agents in tactical gear, their weapons drawn, but pointed at the floor in a gesture that suggested they expected cooperation rather than resistance. They moved with professional competence, but Elena could see in their eyes that they believed they were arresting a traitor who had sold out her country for money. "Elena," Richard said warmly, his voice carrying the grandfatherly affection that had fooled her for decades. "You look tired, my dear. These past few days have been difficult for all of us." "Hello, Richard." Elena remained seated behind her desk, her posture relaxed despite the weapons pointed in her direction. "I assume you have the documentation you promised, the guarantees for my employees' safety." Richard produced a folder thick with legal documents, setting it on her desk, with the satisfaction of a man completing a masterful negotiation. "Everything you requested. Presidential pardons for all Titan defense personnel, immunity from prosecution, even generous severance packages." His smile was warm, paternal. "You see, Elena, I've kept my word." Elena picked up the documents, scanning them with the analytical mind that had made her one of the most feared negotiators in corporate America. The paperwork was genuine, signed by officials who probably believed they were protecting national security by offering clemency to the victims of her supposed treason. "Very thorough," she said finally. "Richard, you've thought of everything." "I've had years to plan, my dear. Unlike your grandfather, I understand that real victory requires patience and precision." Richard moved to the windows, looking out over a city that had no idea its fate was being decided 40 floors above the street. Elena Aurora will do more good in the right hands than it ever could have under Victor's naive idealism. The right hands being yours, of course. The right hands being people who understand that power exists to be used wisely, not hoarded by old men with outdated moral compasses. Richard turned back to her, his expression becoming serious, almost sad. Elena, your grandfather could never see the bigger picture. He thought Aurora should be given away freely shared with anyone who wanted it. He never understood that some people can't be trusted with that kind of power. Elena felt rage building in her chest, but she kept her voice calm, conversational. People like foreign governments, terrorist organizations, the enemies you've been telling everyone I sold Aurora to, people like idealistic scientists who think technology should serve humanity instead of serving the people capable of using it responsibly. Richard's voice hardened. Elena, the world is not a philosophy classroom. It's a battlefield where the strong survive and the weak are consumed. Your grandfather forgot that lesson, and it cost him his life. You murdered him. Elena's words cut through the air like a blade. Your oldest friend, your business partner for 20 years, you killed him for Aurora. I saved Aurora from his weakness. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath his grandfatherly facade. Elena Victor was going to give this technology away. He was planning to publish Aurora's specifications to make it available to every nation on Earth. Can you imagine the chaos? Every 2-bit dictator with access to weapons that could render traditional military force obsolete. Elena stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. Through the windows, she could see news helicopters circling the building, their cameras broadcasting the siege to millions of viewers who were about to witness something unprecedented. So, you decided that Aurora should belong to you and your consortium instead. We decided that Aurora should belong to people who understand responsibility. Richard gestured toward the federal agents who shifted uncomfortably as they began to sense undercurrents they didn't fully understand. Elena, surrender the Aurora codes now, and this ends peacefully. Continue this charade and I'll be forced to authorize more aggressive measures. Elena looked at the countdown display on her computer screen. 7 minutes until Aurora's field collapsed. 6 minutes until Dr. Chen's evidence broadcast reached full saturation. 5 minutes until every major news network on Earth received complete documentation of the consortium's crimes. Richard, she said softly, there's something I need to tell you. I'm listening. Elena activated the hidden recording system that had been documenting their entire conversation, then looked directly at Richard with the kind of smile that had made enemies fear her and allies trust her with their lives. You're absolutely right about one thing. Aurora should belong to people who understand responsibility. Elena's voice carried the authority that had built empires. That's why I've spent the last hour uploading complete technical specifications to every major university research institution and government laboratory on the planet. Richard's face went white. You wouldn't dare. I already have. Elena pulled up displays showing the global distribution of Aurora's technology, watching, as research centers from MIT to Tokyo confirmed receipt of the data. Richard, in about 4 minutes, every intelligence agency on Earth will know exactly how Aurora works. The technology will be public domain available to anyone with the resources to build it. You've doomed us all. Richard's composure finally cracked, revealing the fury and desperation beneath his carefully maintained facade. Elena, do you have any idea what you've done, Aurora, in the hands of every nation on Earth, terrorists, dictators, anyone with access to the right materials? I've democratized defense, Richard. I've made it impossible for people like you to hold the world hostage with superior technology. Elena moved around her desk, positioning herself between Richard and the federal agents. But that's not the best part. Richard's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Elena smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying expression the federal agents had ever seen. The best part is that I've been recording our entire conversation. Every word, every confession, every admission of guilt. She looked directly at the lead agent. Agent Morrison, I believe you've been wondering why a supposedly treasonous CEO would be so calm while surrounded by federal agents. Agent Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from Mr. Blackwood. Because the real traitor isn't the woman who just gave humanity's greatest defensive technology to the world for free. Elena's voice carried absolute certainty. The real traitor is the man who murdered Victor Cross and spent years selling American defense secrets to the highest bidder. Richard lunged toward Elena, but Agent Morrison was faster, his training taking over as the pieces of a conspiracy began falling into place. Mr. Blackwood, I need you to step back and keep your hands visible. You don't understand. Richard's voice was pure desperation now. She's the traitor. She's working with foreign governments to steal American technology. Agent Morrison, Elena said calmly, I assume you have secure communication with FBI headquarters. Yes, ma'am. Then I suggest you contact them immediately. About 3 minutes ago, every major news network in the country received evidence of a conspiracy spanning decades, financial records, communication intercepts, documented proof of the systematic corruption of American defense contractors. Elena looked at Richard with the kind of satisfaction that came from watching years of planning reach fruition. Your bosses are probably trying to reach you right now. Agent Morrison activated his radio, his expression growing increasingly grim as he received updates from his superiors. Through the static and coded phrases, Elena could hear the panic in the voices of people who had suddenly realized they were on the wrong side of the biggest scandal in modern American history. Agent Morrison, Elena continued, you'll also find that Mr. Blackwood has been transferring classified defense information to a network of international buyers for the past 5 years. Bank records, communication logs, even video evidence of meetings with foreign agents. Richard made another desperate lunge, this time toward the windows, where Aurora's field still shimmered with otherworldly energy. If I can't have Aurora, then no one can. But before he could reach the windows, before he could throw himself against the protective field that would have killed him instantly, strong hands caught him and pulled him back. Agent Morrison and his team had finally understood what they were really dealing with. Not a treasonous CEO, but a conspiracy that had infected the highest levels of American government. Richard Blackwood, Agent Morrison said with the formal authority of federal law enforcement, you're under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and the murder of Victor Cross. As Richard was restrained and read his rights, Elena felt something she had never experienced before, the absolute certainty that justice was finally being served. Through her windows, she could see news helicopters circling closer, their cameras capturing the arrest of one of America's most respected defense contractors. Elena, Daniel's voice crackled through her earpiece. I'm watching the news feeds. Are you all right? I'm perfect, she replied, meaning it completely. Daniel, how's the situation in Montana? Consortium forces turned around about 10 minutes ago. Apparently, someone higher up the food chain realized that their entire operation had been compromised. Daniel's voice carried amazement and relief in equal measure. Elena, you did it. You actually brought down the whole network. Elena looked at the displays showing Aurora's power levels finally stabilizing as the emergency broadcast completed, watched news networks around the world beginning to report on the biggest defense contractor scandal in history, felt the weight of responsibility and fear finally lifting from her shoulders. "We did it," she corrected. "Daniel, I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Elena, there's something else. The Montana facility is secure. Aurora's technology is now public domain, and I've just received word that similar consortium operations in 12 other countries have been shut down simultaneously." Daniel paused, and Elena could hear the smile in his voice. "We didn't just save Aurora. We saved the world from the people who would have used it to enslave everyone else." As federal agents escorted Richard Blackwood toward the elevator, the man who had orchestrated decades of conspiracy looked back at Elena with the kind of hatred that could have melted steel. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," he said, his voice carrying the bitterness of absolute defeat. "Aurora in everyone's hands means no one is safe. You've guaranteed that the next war will destroy civilization itself." Elena met his gaze steadily, her voice carrying the kind of certainty that came from finally understanding her true purpose. "Richard, you're wrong about one thing. Aurora in everyone's hands means everyone is safe. When every nation has the same defensive capabilities, when no one can gain military supremacy through superior technology, wars become pointless. Naive idealism just like your grandfather. No, Richard. Strategic thinking. Something you never really understood." Elena smiled, and it was the expression of a woman who had just reshaped the world according to her grandfather's vision. "You thought power came from controlling what other people couldn't have. I learned that real power comes from making sure everyone has what they need to protect themselves." As the elevator doors closed on Richard Blackwood's bitter face, Elena found herself alone in the office where her journey had begun just days earlier. Through the windows, she could see Aurora's field beginning to fade as the emergency protocols shut down the projection system, its job finally complete. "Daniel," she said softly, "when can you come home?" "I'm already on my way. Elena, there's a transport leaving Montana in 20 minutes, and I'll be in New York before dawn." Daniel's voice was soft, intimate, the kind of tone reserved for promises and confessions. "Elena, when I get there, when we're finally together, without conspiracies and assassination attempts and classified technologies hanging over us, I have something very important to ask you." Elena felt her heart skip. "What kind of something?" "The kind that involves the rest of our lives, and whether you'd be interested in making this marriage more than just a business arrangement." Daniel paused, and Elena could hear aircraft engines in the background. "Elena, I know we got married for all the wrong reasons, but I'd like to stay married for all the right ones." Elena felt tears of joy threatening, felt love and hope and exhaustion all tangled together in a knot of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Daniel Reed, are you proposing to your own wife?" "I'm proposing to the woman I fell in love with while she was saving the world." Daniel's voice carried the kind of tenderness that made her forget everything else. "Elena, will you marry me again, properly this time, with flowers and family and all the normal things we missed the first time around?" Elena looked out over the city that was waking up to a new reality, where the rules of warfare and power had been permanently rewritten by a woman who had refused to surrender, and a man who had loved her enough to risk everything for her safety. "Yes," she said simply. "Daniel, yes to everything. Yes to marrying you again. Yes to the normal life. Yes to arguments about dinner and waking up together every morning." Elena felt tears finally spilling over, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of love so pure it made her feel like she could fly. Yes to whatever comes next as long as we face it together. 6 months later, Elena Cross stood in the garden of the Montana facility, now transformed into a research center where scientists from around the world worked together to refine and improve Aurora technology. The crystalline generators hummed peacefully in laboratories that had once been battlefields, their energy used now to power medical equipment and environmental restoration projects rather than weapons of war. The woman who had once been the ice queen of corporate America wore a simple white dress and a smile that could have powered cities, surrounded by friends and family who had gathered to witness something unprecedented. The marriage of Elena Cross and Daniel Reed performed properly this time, with flowers and music and all the normal things they had missed during their first ceremony. Dr. Chen served as Elena's maid of honor, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a scientist whose work had changed the world for the better. Thompson walked Elena down the aisle with the pride of a man who had protected someone worth protecting, his weathered face soft with emotion as he prepared to give away the closest thing he had to a daughter. Daniel waited at the altar, wearing a smile that transformed his entire face, no longer the unremarkable janitor or the dangerous operative, but simply a man deeply in love with the woman walking toward him. Behind him stood colleagues from his military days, men and women who had traveled across the world to witness their commander finally finding the peace he had earned through years of service. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Elena barely heard the words. Her attention was entirely focused on Daniel's eyes, on the promise she saw there, on the future they would build together now that the shadows had finally lifted. When the time came for vows, Elena found herself speaking from the heart, rather than from memory. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying across the garden, where Aurora's gentle energy created subtle distortions in the afternoon air. "You came into my life as a mystery, and you became my salvation. You protected me when I didn't know I needed protection, loved me when I didn't think I deserved love, and stood beside me when I had to choose between safety and doing what was right." She paused, looking at the man who had risked everything for her, feeling love so deep it seemed to change the very structure of reality around them. "I promise to love you in the quiet moments and the dangerous ones in the normal life we've always wanted, and whatever extraordinary adventures we might find. I promise to trust you with my heart, my dreams, and my future, because you've already proven yourself worthy of all three." Elena's voice grew stronger, carrying the authority that had built empires and the tenderness that belonged entirely to him. "Daniel Reed, you are my husband, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Today, tomorrow, and for every day we're given after that." Daniel's vows were simpler, but no less powerful, spoken with the quiet certainty of a man who had finally found his home. "Elena, you are the strongest, bravest, most brilliant woman I've ever known, and somehow you chose to love me back. You trusted me with your life, your company, and your heart, and I promise to prove worthy of that trust every day for the rest of our lives." Daniel took her hands, his voice soft, but carrying across the garden like a prayer. "I promise to love you, protect you, support you, and probably argue with you about dinner for the next 50 years. Elena Cross, you are my wife, my queen, and my everything." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Daniel kissed her, with the kind of passion that made the assembled guests cheer, and Aurora's energy field pulse in sympathy, Elena felt something she had never experienced before, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the right person, building exactly the life she had always dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. The reception that followed was a celebration not just of their marriage, but of a world transformed. Scientists and soldiers, corporate executives and government officials, all united by the knowledge that they had witnessed something unprecedented, the democratization of humanity's greatest defensive technology and the love story that had made it possible. As the evening wore on and guests began to drift away, Elena found herself dancing with her husband under stars that seemed brighter than they had any right to be. Aurora's gentle energy created a bubble of perfect peace around them, a sanctuary where the most powerful woman in American defense contracting could simply be a bride in love with her groom. "Mrs. Reed," Daniel said softly, pulling her closer as they swayed to music that seemed to come from the very air around them. "How does it feel to have saved the world?" "Like the second best thing I've ever done," Elena replied, looking into the eyes of the man who had become her anchor, her adventure, and her home. "What was the first?" Elena smiled, the expression of a woman who had found everything she had never known she was looking for. "Falling in love with my husband." As they danced under the Montana sky, surrounded by the gentle hum of Aurora technology that now belonged to all humanity, Elena Cross, Reed, felt something she had never experienced before. The perfect peace that came from knowing that the most important battle of her life was finally over, and she had won everything that truly mattered. The Ice Queen had melted, completely transformed by love and purpose into something infinitely more powerful, a woman who had changed the world and found her heart in the process. The janitor who had swept floors and protected secrets had become the husband who would spend the rest of his life making sure she never forgot how extraordinary their ordinary love had become. And in laboratories around the world, Aurora generators hummed with the promise of a future where no one would ever again have to choose between power and principles, between safety and doing what was right, between building an empire and finding a home. The greatest love story ever told had also become the greatest defense technology ever created, and both would protect humanity for generations to come.